Continuing coverage of the president's address to the nation on Syria. Let's talk more about it. Rand Paul is a Republican senator from Kentucky. He's been speaking about this a lot. Senator, thanks for being here.
Glad to be with you.
Your thoughts on the president's address?
Well, it didn't quite convince me. You know, I think what he needed to lay out for the American public was a compelling American interest or national security interest in Syria. There obviously was an atrocity committed, and I think it's awful. It's on top of another 100,000 people that have been killed previously by conventional weapons. But you know, there are also atrocities on the other side. The Islamic rebels who we would destabilize Assad would be advantaged. The Islamic rebels include Al-Qaeda, include Islamic rebels who have cut the heart out of Syrian soldiers and eaten them on TV, Islamic rebels who have killed Christians, kidnapped bishops. So I think there's atrocities on both sides, and I see no clear ally for America on either side of the civil war.
He said it's a violation of international law. He pointed to 1997 when the U.S. Senate overwhelmingly approved the international agreement prohibiting the use of chemical weapons, and he said we need to be in there for our principles.
Absolutely. I don't disagree that it's a violation of international law. It's a violation of every norm for someone to kill civilians, and I think Assad should be accountable. I think if Assad's responsible, he deserves death for this. To kill civilian and women and children is without excuse. There is no justification for it. But really what we're talking about is, according to the administration, an unbelievably small response, unbelievably short. We're not going after Assad. We're not going to destabilize. We have no plan for victory. In fact, to my mind, the Obama administration is arguing for stalemate. And I just can't see committing my son or your son or my daughter or your daughter to a war when our goal is stalemate. To a person, every GI I meet, every parent I meet, not one of them wants to get involved in the civil war. And it's not that we don't have sympathy, we just don't see a military or an American objective here.
What do you make of this Russian proposal with Syria giving up its chemical weapons to inspectors and to be destroyed?
In some ways, my first response is it kind of looks like President Obama's been outmaneuvered here by Putin in the last week or so. I don't know whether to trust the proposal or not. I do know that when you see the speech that Secretary Kerry was making about, oh, if they'd give up their weapons, it seems almost offhand or flippant that he didn't ever expect to have anybody respond. Putin then responds, calls their bluff. So the question is, are they serious? If they're serious, it's a good step forward, and I'm more than happy to even give the president credit if it actually happens. I hope it happens, because I don't think attacking Assad militarily will make things more stable. The president thinks it adds to stability. I think it adds to instability and makes the chances that the chemical weapons fall into the hands of extremists more likely if we attack Assad, not less likely.
So do you believe how the president and his administration have handled this has hurt U.S. credibility around the world?
I think U.S. credibility doesn't reside in one person. I think it's made it difficult for the president to lead this country because I think he's been a little bit here, a little bit there, and a little bit everywhere without a real precise and clear message of national security and American interests and what our objectives are there. So in that way, yes. But I think our credibility as a country is more than just one man. I think it's, you know, it's our whole history as a country. And I think particularly after 9/11, you saw an America that was united and responded and said to any of our enemies anywhere in the world that we will respond with overwhelming force and we'll respond with victory to wipe out anybody who would attack us. So I think the idea that this would embolden people to attack us or use chemical weapons on our soldiers really is nonsensical, because we would never tolerate that. But the fact that it happened in Syria really doesn't have anything to do with American troops.
But you don't think this is a threat to national security interests for the U.S.?
No, I think it has nothing to really to do with our national security. Syria is not a threat to us. What I would say is that stability in the Middle East is an American interest. But I think attacking Assad and destabilizing him empowers or encourages Al-Qaeda. It encourages radical Islam that's trying to take over that country. And I'm not sure who's worse. Assad is really bad, but his control of chemical weapons, I'm not sure if that's worse than the Al-Qaeda getting the chemical weapons.
So it's a President Paul.
I like the presumption so far.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What are you doing?
I think we have to be involved in the Middle East to create stability. And I think the way we create stability is ultimately what President Obama has said all along. We need a negotiated settlement to the Civil War that includes something where the chemical weapons are taken out of use within Syria. So maybe the diplomatic solution ends up working. I've always thought that we've done too little, too late with getting Russia involved here. But the way diplomacy has to work is Russia has to believe it's in her self-interest. And I think trade and exchange with us is in Russia's self-interest. And I think having a stable Syria is in Russia's self-interest. We have to convince them of that. But also we need to trust but verify. We can't just go willy-nilly and say, oh, Russia's now going to be our great ally in this either.
But if Israel and Jordan, that seems to be in the crosshairs of all of this, comes to you as president and says, we need your help, what are you saying to them?
Well, I think that's a real question. So, for example, one of the big problems is refugees flowing into Jordan right now. There's 500,000. It's a catastrophe over there. But my question is, if you bomb Assad tomorrow, will there be more or less refugees? There's going to be more. There's already more refugees, people anticipating the bombing or fleeing. So I don't think it creates more stability. Same way with Israel. I don't want Israel to be attacked by sarin gas. But I think if we bomb Assad, Assad already is acting irrationally. Will he be discouraged or encouraged? The administration, Secretary Kerry says, absolutely, I guarantee if we do nothing, he'll use more chemical gas. Well, there's also the possibility we attack him and he launches chemical gas attacks outside of his borders, which he hasn't done yet.
Senator, last thing quickly. Is there any chance this vote gets through Congress?
You know, I all along thought it would pass in the Senate and was very close in the House. I think even in the Senate's in question now. The calls are 100 to 1. Everywhere I go, every phone call we get, the public is overwhelmingly opposed to this. I don't think he can overcome that. And so I think rather than risk defeat, there won't be a vote. And in some ways, I think he's gotten very lucky that Putin has sort of maybe picked this up. And if Putin falls through with it, the president will come out looking like he had this grand plan, when in reality, I think it's fortuitous.
Senator Paul, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Now some thoughts from senior political analyst Bret on this speech. Good evening, Bret.
Hi, Brett.
What do you think?
Well, I think it was a speech in search of a purpose. I mean, after all, just ask yourself this question, Brett. What did the president ask for tonight? He came in support of a resolution that he has asked Congress to postpone. He's asking for support for an authorization for the use of force, but he didn't want to do that, and he doesn't even want him to vote on it. That's, you know, I think the events of yesterday just overtook him. He'd asked for the time. He'd announced the speech. I think he had to go through with it. I think he did the best he could with it. But your interview with Senator Paul gave you a sense of all the different reasons that a multitude of people from various parts of the political spectrum have for opposing this action. This resolution authorizing the use of force, I think Senator Paul is correct. This was probably in trouble in the Senate, where it looked like it might pass, and it is nowhere in the House of Representatives. And I don't think anything the president did or said tonight is going to change that, since it's going to be followed by this pause, which will allow the effect of whatever he said to peter out, is going to change that.
Is your sense that there is a real hope that this diplomatic dance with Russia and Syria that's going on now is going to pan out, is going to work? Or do you think there's a real skepticism in the administration that this is going to come to pass?
Well, I think the administration has said it is skeptical. And perhaps it is skeptical. One should always be skeptical when Russia intervenes, when Moscow intervenes at a time like this. I remember back, Brett, during the run-up to the first Gulf War, even after the bombing campaign had begun to get Iraq out of Kuwait, that Russia was, or Moscow, I should say, was still trying to intercede on behalf of Iraq, and with various peace plans and so forth, which didn't really fill the bill. We don't know whether this Russian plan is serious. We do know that they are now began to attach conditions to it, to one of them being, of course, that U.S. forswear the use of force. One would imagine that was unacceptable to the administration. So, yeah, I think they're probably skeptical, and with good reason, but they're asking for the pause, and the pause will take some of the air out of the tire here, but it will not leave the president, in my judgment, in any better fettle with the American public or Congress if he's continuing to take the position that he must have their authorization to use force, and he won't act without it.
Last thing quickly, most effective part of the speech?
Well, I think his characterization of the horror of chemical weapons was quite effective. It is a horrible thing. There's no question about that. And the Syrian regime needs to be held to account for that. But he's asking for a pause in all of that.
Bret, as always, thank you.
You bet.
More thoughts from our expanded panel after a quick break. And still ahead, the timeline of the administration's evolving policy. And talking about it, we'll be right back.